The afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the manicured lawns of Willow Creek Estates, a neighborhood where the lawns were always perfect, the hedges trimmed with military precision, and the homeowners association reigned with a quiet, unyielding authority. On the surface, it seemed like an ideal place to live, a picture of suburban harmony. But beneath that pristine veneer, tensions simmered, waiting for the smallest spark to ignite chaos. That spark, unbeknownst to anyone at the time, would come in the form of a woman named Karen, a longtime HOA member whose reputation for meticulous enforcement of rules was matched only by her lack of compassion for anyone who dared to step out of line. My sister, Emily, was 7 months pregnant, glowing with the anticipation of new life, yet carrying the exhaustion that only comes with late pregnancy. She had moved to Willow Creek Estates with her husband, Jonathan, hoping for a peaceful environment where she could enjoy her last months of pregnancy without worry. Emily was cautious, polite, and careful, traits that, in any rational world, should have kept her safe from conflict. But Karen had made it her mission to assert control, to remind everyone in the community that deviation from her rigid standards would not be tolerated. Emily had noticed Karen's presence from the first day she moved in, often observing her from across the street, clipboard in hand, as she inspected every detail of her neighbor's properties. But it wasn't until a cold December afternoon that their paths collided in a way that would forever change our lives. Emily had parked her car slightly over the line in the HOA assigned space, just a few inches beyond the boundary, thinking it was harmless. Karen, however, saw it differently. She stormed over, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement, her face a mask of fury and self-righteous indignation. "Do you know how many complaints I've received about cars like yours?" Karen demanded, her voice slicing through the crisp air. "This is unacceptable. You need to move it immediately." Emily, trying to remain calm, explained gently, "I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was over the line. I'll move it right away." But Karen wasn't satisfied with mere compliance. She leaned in closer, her breath tinged with perfume and anger. "Sorry doesn't fix this. You need to understand the consequences of your actions. The HOA has rules, and rules are not optional." Emily nodded, turning to get into her car, hoping the confrontation would end. But Karen's next words stopped her in her tracks. "And don't think this is over. I'll be keeping an eye on you from now on. One more slip, and I'll make sure everyone knows about it." A chill ran down Emily's spine. She could feel the tension escalating, the way Karen's gaze seemed to pierce through her, calculating and cruel. It was a warning, but Emily didn't yet understand how dangerous Karen could be when she set her mind on tormenting someone. Over the next few weeks, Karen's harassment intensified. She reported Emily for minor infractions: leaves on the lawn, a small garden gnome placed slightly off-center, even the sound of Emily's laughter in the backyard during a small family gathering. Each complaint was meticulously documented, submitted to the HOA board, and often exaggerated. Emily's stress levels soared. She tried to reason with Karen, to explain her perspective, to appeal to her humanity, but Karen remained unmoved, relentless in her pursuit of perfection. The tension reached a breaking point on a frigid Saturday morning, just a week before Christmas. Emily had gone outside to collect a few packages from the porch. Jonathan was at work, and she had planned a quiet day of organizing the nursery for their soon-to-arrive baby. But Karen had been waiting, lurking near the mailbox with an icy expression, her hands clenched around her clipboard. Without warning, Karen stepped forward, blocking Emily's path. "You think you can ignore the rules?" Karen spat, her tone venomous. "You think you can just do whatever you want because you're pregnant? I don't care about your excuses." Emily, startled and frightened, tried to step around her. "Karen, please. I haven't done anything wrong." But Karen wasn't listening. In a sudden, aggressive movement, she shoved Emily, hard enough that Emily stumbled back, clutching her swollen belly. Pain shot through her abdomen, and she gasped, fear surging through every fiber of her being. Neighbors who had been watching from behind curtains and blinds whispered among themselves, some frozen in shock, others unsure how to intervene. The shove left Emily shaken and terrified. She had never experienced aggression like this in her life, and now, she was acutely aware of the fragility of her condition. Panic set in, and she called Jonathan, her voice trembling, barely able to form words. "Jonathan, Karen. She attacked me." Within minutes, Jonathan was there, rushing through the gates of Willow Creek Estates, his car tires screeching as he skidded to a halt. He leapt from the vehicle, his eyes scanning the scene, fury and concern intertwining in a dangerous combination. Jonathan had always been protective, but he was not someone who had ever needed to defend his family in this way, or so anyone would have assumed. What Karen did not know, what she could never have anticipated, was that Jonathan's past was far from ordinary. Jonathan's presence alone changed the dynamic. Where Karen had wielded intimidation, Jonathan brought calm authority. He helped Emily to her feet, assessing her quickly for injuries. Relief washed over Emily at the sight of him, but a part of her was also terrified. She knew Jonathan's protective instincts were strong, and she feared what might happen next. Karen, sensing a shift in power, sneered. "You think you can stop me? I know the rules, and I will make sure you regret this. You're not going to get away with this." Jonathan stepped closer, his voice low but commanding. "Leave her alone, Karen. Now." Karen's confident demeanor faltered for a split second, just long enough for Jonathan to take control of the situation. His calm yet unyielding presence was disarming. He guided Emily back to the safety of their home, making sure she was unharmed before turning back to confront the woman who had caused so much fear and distress. The encounter left an indelible mark on the neighborhood. Whispers circulated, questions arose about who Jonathan really was, and how someone could command such respect and authority with a mere look. Emily tried to rest, to convince herself that this was a one-time incident, but the fear lingered. The shadow of Karen's aggression hung over her every step, making simple tasks feel monumental. She realized that this was not merely about parking spaces or garden gnomes. It was about control, power, and the lengths to which some people would go to assert dominance over others. Jonathan, meanwhile, was not content with passive reassurance. He began documenting the incident meticulously, gathering evidence, taking statements from neighbors who had witnessed the attack, and researching the legal avenues available to protect his wife and unborn child. He also knew that Karen thrived on intimidation and that any sign of weakness would embolden her further. This was not just about enforcing rules. It was about confronting injustice, protecting dignity, and ensuring that his family would never be subjected to this kind of fear again. The tension escalated as the holidays approached. Willow Creek Estates, which had once felt like a safe haven, now seemed like a battlefield. Emily, struggling with her pregnancy, found herself navigating fear, anxiety, and anger, unsure how to reclaim her peace in a community dominated by a woman whose sense of righteousness had crossed into cruelty. Meanwhile, Jonathan's strategy was unfolding quietly but deliberately. He knew that the right combination of evidence, legal intervention, and community support could turn the tables, but it would require patience, courage, and a level of precision that mirrored the very meticulousness Karen had wielded against his family. Late one evening, as snow began to blanket the pristine streets, Emily and Jonathan sat together in the nursery, the soft glow of a lamp casting shadows across the room. Jonathan held her hand, whispering reassurances, reminding her that they were not powerless. Emily, still shaken but beginning to feel a spark of hope, looked into his eyes and saw a resolve that was unshakable. The man she had married was not only protective but capable of confronting injustice in ways that no one could have predicted. In that moment, Emily understood something fundamental. The fight was not just against Karen. It was against fear, intimidation, and the false sense of superiority that some people use to control others. With Jonathan by her side, she felt a surge of courage she had never known, a determination to stand firm not only for herself but for the life growing inside her. Little did Karen know, the confrontation she had orchestrated in her mind as a moment of triumph would become the catalyst for her own reckoning. Jonathan's past, a hidden layer of strength and authority, was about to emerge in ways that no one could have foreseen. And as the first flakes of snow settled on the silent streets, A quiet but powerful tension hung in the air. A tension that promised that the battle for justice, dignity, and family honor was only just beginning. The following days were a blur of unease and quiet preparation. Emily moved carefully, each step measured, conscious of her condition and wary of Karen's unpredictable presence. Even the simplest errands became exercises in vigilance. The once familiar streets of Willow Creek Estates now felt like a gauntlet, every neighbor's glance a potential judgment, every shadow a possible threat. Yet, amidst the anxiety, Emily began to notice a subtle but steady reassurance in Jonathan's presence. He was calm, meticulous, and unyielding, a silent storm gathering strength while the neighborhood remained oblivious to the depths of his resolve. Jonathan had never been one to act recklessly. His life before Willow Creek Estates had been defined by precision, discipline, and a commitment to protecting those who could not defend themselves. It was a past carefully hidden from casual observers, one that included rigorous training, covert operations, and an unwavering moral code. Most people assumed he was simply a diligent professional, a devoted husband and father-to-be. Karen, in her arrogance, assumed he was just like any other neighbor, ordinary, compliant, and incapable of countering her schemes. She could not have been more wrong. Emily's fears, though persistent, began to ease slightly under Jonathan's careful guidance. He had taken every precaution to ensure her safety, installing extra security measures around their home, coordinating with trusted neighbors, and making clear, quietly assertive gestures that reminded Karen that she was being watched. Jonathan's calm authority had a subtle but profound effect, sending a clear message that any further aggression would have consequences far beyond the petty HOA disputes Karen thrived upon. But Karen's pride and sense of entitlement could not be quelled by mere warnings. She escalated her behavior, sending letters to the HOA board filled with exaggerations, accusations, and insinuations about Emily's conduct. She called neighbors, spreading rumors, painting Emily as negligent, irresponsible, and difficult, claims as baseless as they were malicious. Yet each attempt only solidified Jonathan's resolve. He knew that patience, evidence, and timing would be their allies in this battle. Then came the evening that changed everything. Emily had been preparing dinner when a loud knock echoed through the house. She froze, her hand instinctively cradling her belly. Jonathan, already on alert, moved to the door, his expression calm but vigilant. When he opened it, there was Karen, her usual smug expression replaced by something more volatile, a mixture of frustration and fear. "You think you can hide from me?" Karen demanded, stepping forward without invitation. "I know what's happening in this house. You can't keep me away forever." Jonathan's eyes narrowed slightly, and his voice was steady, low, and authoritative. "You are trespassing. Leave now, or I will call the authorities." Karen laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Call the authorities? And say what? That I confronted a pregnant woman who can barely stand up for herself? You're just as weak as she is." Her words were meant to provoke fear, but instead, they ignited a controlled fury in Jonathan. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't act impulsively, but the tension in his posture, the precision in his gaze, spoke volumes. Jonathan stepped aside slightly, not to yield, but to let the gravity of the situation sink in. Then, without warning, the calm, calculated side of him emerged, a side few had ever seen. Karen's smirk faltered as Jonathan's presence transformed. The years of training, discipline, and expertise that had defined him in ways she could never comprehend were suddenly evident in his stance, his movements, and the subtle authority that emanated from him. He wasn't just Emily's husband. He was someone who had spent a lifetime ensuring that injustice, cruelty, and aggression met firm resistance. Karen backed up slightly, realizing that her usual tactics, intimidation, aggression, manipulation, were ineffective here. Jonathan's calm intensity was a shield and a weapon, invisible yet unmistakable. He didn't need to act violently. The message was clear. Any further attempt to harm Emily would be met with decisive consequences. That night, Jonathan sat with Emily in the nursery, gently brushing her hair back and assuring her that the danger had passed. For now. But he also made it clear that this was not just about avoidance. It was about confronting the problem at its root. Karen's aggression could not continue unchecked. Not for Emily's safety. Not for the dignity of their family. They devised a careful plan. Gather irrefutable evidence, involve the HOA board, and, if necessary, the authorities. Every conversation, every encounter, every letter from Karen was meticulously documented, forming a web of proof that would make her position untenable. The next week unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony. Jonathan and Emily moved quietly but decisively. They coordinated with neighbors who had witnessed Karen's harassment, gathering statements and corroborations. They collected photographs, videos, and copies of her letters. They even recorded instances of her verbal threats when she failed to maintain the pretense of civility. Every detail mattered. Every piece of evidence was a brushstroke in a portrait that would ultimately reveal Karen not as a concerned HOA member, but as a person consumed by cruelty and obsession. Karen, meanwhile, grew increasingly erratic. Her once confident demeanor cracked under the weight of her escalating desperation. She began making overt attempts to provoke Emily, but each effort was met with Jonathan's unwavering presence. He guided Emily with subtle gestures, strategic positioning, and calm reassurance, ensuring that Karen's attacks could not escalate physically. With each passing day, the imbalance of power became more apparent. Karen's fury was reactive, uncontrolled. Jonathan's authority was proactive, deliberate, and undeniable. Then came the decisive confrontation. It was a cold evening, the sky painted in shades of deep indigo, when Jonathan, armed with documentation and the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was doing, requested an official HOA hearing. The board, accustomed to Karen's reports and complaints, expected a routine session. They did not expect what arrived with Jonathan. Emily sat quietly beside him, hands folded over her belly, as Jonathan presented the evidence. He spoke clearly, professionally, and without a hint of anger, detailing the pattern of harassment, the aggressive confrontations, and the baseless accusations that had terrorized his wife. He submitted photographs, video recordings, and sworn statements from neighbors who had witnessed Karen's actions firsthand. The board members were stunned. The documentation was thorough, indisputable, and presented with the kind of calm authority that left no room for argument. Karen, for the first time, realized that her usual tactics, intimidation, selective evidence, and manipulation had failed. She tried to interject, to twist the narrative, but Jonathan anticipated each move, responding with facts, timelines, and corroborated evidence. Her smirk vanished. The arrogance that had fueled her attacks dissolved under the weight of accountability. When the hearing concluded, the board made a decision that reverberated through the community. Karen's privileges within the HOA were suspended pending further review, and her pattern of harassment was formally documented. The decision was not just a legal or procedural victory, it was a moral one. Emily, relieved and emotionally drained, felt a wave of vindication. The fear that had gripped her for weeks began to lift, replaced by a cautious but growing sense of safety. In the days that followed, life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. Emily focused on preparing for the arrival of her child, her steps lighter and her heart steadier. Jonathan, ever vigilant but no longer in crisis mode, supported her with a quiet pride, knowing that they had navigated a perilous situation with dignity, strategy, and courage. The neighborhood, once dominated by Karen's oppressive presence, began to notice the shift. Neighbors who had whispered from behind curtains now approached Emily and Jonathan with quiet respect, acknowledging the strength it took to confront injustice. But perhaps the most profound impact was on Emily herself. The ordeal had tested her limits, challenged her sense of security, and forced her to confront fear in a way she never imagined. Yet, through it all, she discovered a resilience she hadn't known she possessed. With Jonathan by her side, she realized that courage is not the absence of fear, but the determination to act despite it. She saw firsthand that justice is not always swift, but it is possible when met with patience, strategy, and unwavering integrity. And as Christmas approached, the final chapter of their confrontation unfolded not with drama or spectacle, but with quiet affirmation. Jonathan and Emily decorated their home, the soft glow of lights reflecting not just holiday cheer, but a deeper sense of triumph. The nursery, once a place of anxious preparation, now felt safe and filled with hope. They knew that Karen would continue to exist within the community, but the balance of power had shifted irrevocably. The woman who had sought to intimidate and control had been confronted with accountability, and in that confrontation, justice and dignity prevailed. On Christmas Eve, as snow blanketed the neighborhood, Emily held Jonathan's hand, feeling the life growing within her and the profound relief of having survived a trial that tested every measure of courage and resolve. Jonathan, his eyes reflecting pride and quiet satisfaction, whispered words of reassurance. "You are safe now. We are safe. And no one can take this peace from us." In that moment, Emily understood something fundamental. The battle against Karen had never been about winning an argument or asserting dominance. It had been about preserving dignity, protecting the vulnerable, and standing firm in the face of fear. And in that victory, she discovered a strength that would carry her into motherhood and beyond, with the unwavering knowledge that courage, integrity, and love can overcome even the most relentless cruelty. Willow Creek Estates, once a place of silent tension and unspoken fears, had witnessed a quiet reckoning. And in the hearts of those who had observed, there remained a powerful lesson. Justice is not always immediate, but it is attainable when approached with patience, strategy, and an unwavering commitment to what is right. Emily and Jonathan had faced intimidation, aggression, and the unexpected consequences of living under the scrutiny of an overbearing HOA member. Yet, through it all, they had emerged not just victorious, but strengthened, their bond and their resolve forged in the crucible of adversity. As the first light of Christmas morning glimmered across the snow-covered streets, Emily looked toward the future with hope, Jonathan's hand firmly in hers. The terror of Karen's attacks had been met with courage and strategy. The injustice had been confronted and held accountable. And in that quiet, victorious moment, the true meaning of courage, dignity, and familial love shone brighter than any Christmas light, leaving an indelible mark not only on their lives but on the community that had witnessed their unwavering strength. The days following the HOA hearing were deceptively calm. Emily tried to focus on preparing for the baby's arrival, immersing herself in nursery arrangements, prenatal classes, and quiet walks around the neighborhood. Jonathan remained a constant presence, balancing vigilance with tenderness, ensuring that each step Emily took was safe and deliberate. Yet beneath the surface, Karen's resentment festered. Being publicly confronted, having her authority challenged, and seeing her manipulative schemes exposed had ignited a fire of humiliation she could not ignore. Karen began to resort to subtler forms of harassment. She would watch Emily from across the street, her gaze lingering, and she started filing minor complaints again, each one seemingly trivial, but designed to instill stress and unease. It was psychological warfare, the kind that left a subtle but persistent ache in Emily's chest. Each time a letter arrived, she felt a spike of tension, a reminder that the battle was not entirely over. But now Emily faced it not with fear, but with strategy. Jonathan recognized the pattern immediately. He explained to Emily that Karen's aggression, though indirect, was a tactic born of frustration and loss of control. "She thrives on fear," he said one evening, voice steady, eyes locked on hers. "But fear doesn't work on us anymore. We respond with evidence, with calm, with certainty. That's how we win, not by escalating, but by showing strength and consistency." Even with Jonathan's reassurances, Emily felt the psychological toll. The anticipation of the baby, the stress from the previous attacks, and the looming sense that Karen could strike again combined into a weight that was hard to shake. Late at night, she would lie awake, listening to the quiet hum of the heating system, imagining every possible scenario. Every corner of the neighborhood seemed to harbor threat. Yet Jonathan's presence beside her became her anchor, a reminder that courage was not the absence of fear, but action despite it. One morning, the tension reached a new peak. Emily was walking in the small community park near their home when she spotted Karen speaking to a group of neighbors, her tone low but intense. Emily's heart pounded. She felt a mixture of anger and apprehension. Before she could react, Jonathan arrived, brisk and purposeful, his presence immediately shifting the dynamics. Karen froze, recognizing him, and for a brief moment, her composed facade cracked. Jonathan didn't speak immediately. He merely observed, calculating, letting Karen know, without words, that any attempt to intimidate would be met with immediate consequences. It was in these moments that Emily realized something profound about her husband. Jonathan's strength was not loud or theatrical. It was quiet, precise, and unwavering, the kind of authority that doesn't need to shout because it's felt in every measured movement, every confident step. Karen, for all her bluster, was no match for that kind of control. And yet, Emily also understood that Karen's persistence would not end simply because she had been confronted. The real challenge was ongoing vigilance, combined with strategic responses that maintained dignity while asserting authority. In the following weeks, the tension ebbed and flowed like the tide. There were moments of uneasy peace, where Emily felt safe enough to relax, only to be reminded of Karen's presence in the subtle ways she had always been aware of but never able to ignore. Jonathan continued his meticulous monitoring, speaking with neighbors, checking security measures, and preparing for any scenario. Emily began to notice, with quiet admiration, the way he balanced calmness with readiness, tenderness with protection. Each day with him reinforced her sense that they were not just surviving, they were reclaiming their space and their peace. Then came an incident that would escalate everything to a tipping point. One evening, as snow began to coat the quiet streets of Willow Creek Estates, Emily returned from a short walk carrying groceries. She noticed Karen loitering near the entrance to their property, her eyes fixed intently on her. Panic surged briefly, but Jonathan was already in the driveway, his eyes sharp, assessing the situation with quiet authority. Karen stepped forward aggressively. "You think you've won," she hissed. "You can't hide from me. This isn't over." Jonathan didn't flinch. His voice was calm but carried a weight that silenced Karen mid-sentence. "Leave now, Karen. You are trespassing. Any further harassment will be treated as criminal behavior." Karen's expression shifted from defiance to uncertainty. She realized, perhaps too late, that her usual intimidation tactics had lost their effect. Jonathan's presence was not just protective, it was transformative. It changed the dynamics completely, rendering her previous strategies powerless. Emily watched, heart racing, as the confrontation unfolded. She realized that courage was infectious. Seeing Jonathan stand firm, unwavering, and calm gave her a profound sense of empowerment. She could see that fear, while natural, could be met with action, strategy, and integrity. After Karen finally retreated, Jonathan led Emily inside, ensuring she was unharmed. He reassured her, emphasizing that while Karen would continue to test boundaries, they now had the tools, evidence, and authority to counter any harassment. Emily began to feel a measure of relief she hadn't experienced since the initial confrontation, a reassurance that came not from the absence of threat, but from the knowledge that she was protected by both preparation and presence. The next days were spent consolidating their position. Jonathan contacted local authorities, updating them on the ongoing harassment and providing the latest documentation. Neighbors who had witnessed Karen's behavior spoke up, lending their support and statements. The community slowly began to recognize that Karen's actions were not merely about enforcing HOA rules. They were about control, intimidation, and personal vendetta. Emily, meanwhile, discovered a growing strength within herself. She had once felt fragile, vulnerable, and overwhelmed by fear. Now, she was learning to navigate the subtle dynamics of threat and intimidation with confidence. She learned that courage was not a single heroic act, but a series of consistent, deliberate choices, each small action reinforcing the next, each measured response building toward resilience. The turning point came just before the holidays. Karen, frustrated by her inability to provoke a reaction, escalated further, attempting to confront Emily directly in the driveway during a family gathering. Jonathan, anticipating her move, was prepared. His strategy was subtle but decisive. Neighbors were alerted, evidence was captured on video, and local authorities were already in communication. Karen's attempt to assert dominance in public backfired spectacularly. She found herself not in control, but exposed, her aggression recorded, witnessed, and formally documented. The aftermath of that incident marked a profound shift. Karen, once a symbol of unchecked power within the neighborhood, became a cautionary tale of the consequences of intimidation. Emily, supported by Jonathan and their community, felt an unprecedented sense of security. The tension that had once pervaded every step, every glance, began to dissipate. The neighborhood, witnessing the accountability and the careful strategy that had confronted Karen, began to change its perception, seeing Emily not as a victim, but as a person who had endured adversity with dignity and resolve. Jonathan's role in this transformation was quietly heroic. He had acted not with recklessness or vengeance, but with precision, strategy, and unwavering ethical grounding. He protected his family, confronted injustice, and restored balance to a community disrupted by aggression. Emily, observing his actions, realized that true courage is measured not in confrontations alone, but in consistent vigilance, deliberate planning, and the moral clarity to act decisively when the moment calls. By the time Christmas approached, Willow Creek Estates was a different neighborhood in subtle ways. Emily prepared for the arrival of her child with calm anticipation, the nursery now a sanctuary rather than a place of anxiety. Jonathan remained vigilant, but his presence was no longer a shield against immediate danger. It had become a source of strength, empowerment, and reassurance. The lessons they had learned, the necessity of courage, the importance of integrity, and the power of careful strategy, resonated deeply. And so, as the first flakes of snow fell gently across the neighborhood, Emily and Jonathan reflected on the journey they had endured. Karen's attempts to intimidate, harass, and control had been met not with fear, but with strategy, dignity, and courage. The victory was not loud or dramatic. It was measured, deliberate, and profound. They had reclaimed their safety, their peace, and their dignity. And in doing so, they had also revealed a truth that would resonate far beyond their own experience. That even in the face of cruelty, steadfast resolve, integrity, and courage can prevail. In the quiet glow of their home, Emily looked toward the future, toward the birth of her child, toward a life rebuilt on safety and love, and toward a community where justice and dignity had been restored. She understood now that the strength she had discovered was not just Jonathan's or her own. It was a shared courage, forged through adversity, that would carry them through all challenges to come. And in that understanding, Emily felt a peace deeper than she had ever known, a quiet triumph that illuminated the true meaning of resilience, family, and unwavering integrity. The days leading up to Christmas were tense, despite the superficial calm that had settled over Willow Creek Estates. Emily tried to focus on the nursery, on preparing for the baby, on small joys that had once been overshadowed by fear. Jonathan remained vigilant, his presence a constant source of reassurance. Yet beneath the quiet routine, the shadow of Karen's resentment still lingered, a reminder that even after victories, vigilance was necessary. Karen, humiliated by the previous hearings and her failed attempts to intimidate, had become unpredictable. Her calculated, procedural harassment gave way to impulsive acts driven by anger and desperation. She no longer masked her malice with pretense or civility. Every encounter radiated aggression. It was a dangerous escalation, one that could no longer be addressed solely through letters or complaints. The situation required decisive action, not just for Emily's safety, but for the dignity of the family and the community. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the streets in shades of amber and gray, Emily stepped out to retrieve a package from the front porch. She sensed Karen before she saw her, standing across the street, arms crossed, eyes sharp and focused. Panic flared briefly in Emily's chest, but she reminded herself to remain calm. Jonathan, noticing Karen's presence, approached quietly, his expression composed but alert. "You need to leave," Jonathan said firmly, his voice carrying a weight that left no room for argument. "Any further attempts to harass my family will have legal consequences." Karen's lips curled into a sneer. "You think you've won? You're just delaying the inevitable." "I won't stop." Jonathan didn't flinch. His calm authority radiated in a way that left Karen momentarily off balance. It was then that Emily realized the true depth of his presence. Not just protective, but commanding, precise, and unwavering. Karen, blinded by anger, had miscalculated entirely. Suddenly, she made a reckless move, stepping onto the driveway and attempting to confront Emily directly. Jonathan acted instantly. He didn't need to raise his voice or use force. His movement was deliberate, strategic, a controlled response that ensured Emily's safety. Karen's advance was halted not with aggression, but with precision and authority that left her no room to maneuver. Emily's heart pounded as Jonathan guided her back inside, ensuring the doors were locked, the security system activated, and the environment controlled. The encounter, brief as it was, reinforced a powerful truth. True courage and protection are measured not by reaction, but by preparation, anticipation, and the ability to maintain composure under pressure. The following day, Jonathan and Emily made a strategic decision. They would not allow Karen to continue her campaign of intimidation. Using the detailed documentation collected over weeks, the letters, recordings, photographs, and witness statements, they filed a formal complaint with local authorities, emphasizing the escalating threats and harassment. This time, the matter was no longer just a neighborhood dispute. It had become a legal issue. Karen's behavior, previously dismissed as petty HOA drama, was now framed as harassment and endangerment. When law enforcement arrived to address the situation, Karen's demeanor shifted dramatically. The confident, controlling facade she had maintained for months crumbled under the scrutiny of official intervention. She tried to argue, to deflect, to manipulate the narrative, but the evidence Jonathan and Emily presented was overwhelming. Witnesses corroborated every claim, videos captured her aggression, and her own words documented her intent. For the first time, Karen faced accountability not as an entitled neighbor, but as a person whose actions had real consequences. As officers escorted her from the property, Emily felt a complex mix of emotions: relief, vindication, and a lingering sense of awe at the precision and courage that had protected her and her unborn child. Jonathan held her hand tightly, whispering reassurances, reminding her that the danger had passed and that they had confronted the situation with integrity and strategy. In the days that followed, the neighborhood itself seemed to exhale. Whispers turned to acknowledgement of Jonathan and Emily's resilience. Neighbors who had previously observed in silence now approached with quiet respect, recognizing the courage it took to stand firm in the face of relentless intimidation. Karen's presence, once a source of anxiety, became a cautionary tale of unchecked aggression meeting inevitable consequences. Emily, reflecting on the ordeal, realized the transformation she had undergone. The terror that had once gripped her every step had been replaced by confidence and empowerment. She had faced fear head-on, guided by strategy, patience, and the unwavering support of her husband. Each challenge had been met with careful preparation and moral clarity, teaching her that courage is not about brute strength, but about steadfastness, intelligence, and ethical resolve. Jonathan, too, recognized the depth of what had been achieved. He had acted not out of vengeance, but with a meticulous focus on protection, justice, and dignity. Every step had been calculated, every action measured, and every interaction guided by principle. In confronting Karen, he had not only safeguarded his family, but had reaffirmed the values of integrity, courage, and accountability within the community. As Christmas Eve approached, Emily prepared the nursery with a sense of calm and anticipation. The house, once a site of anxiety and fear, now radiated warmth, safety, and hope. The soft glow of holiday lights reflected not just festive cheer, but a deeper sense of triumph, a recognition that challenges met with courage and strategy can restore balance, dignity, and peace. On Christmas morning, As snow blanketed Willow Creek Estates, Emily held Jonathan's hand, feeling the life growing within her and the profound relief of having survived a trial that tested every measure of resilience and resolve. The events with Karen, though harrowing, had illuminated essential truths: that courage is found in steadfastness, that justice can be achieved with patience and strategy, and that love and integrity form the strongest shield against cruelty. The neighborhood, once dominated by fear and control, had witnessed the restoration of order and respect. Karen's attempts to dominate through intimidation were decisively countered, leaving a clear lesson for all. Unchecked aggression meets inevitable consequences when confronted with careful planning, moral clarity, and unwavering courage. Emily, reflecting on the journey, understood that the true victory lay not just in the immediate resolution of the conflict, but in the strength, dignity, and empowerment she had discovered within herself. With Jonathan by her side, she felt ready to face the future. Motherhood, family, and community life, with a courage that was both quiet and profound. In the end, Willow Creek Estates returned to its serene appearance, but beneath the surface, the story of confrontation, courage, and justice had left an indelible mark. Emily and Jonathan had proven that even in the face of relentless intimidation, strategy, integrity, and unwavering resolve can triumph. And in that victory, they had safeguarded not only their safety but their dignity, their family, and the values that define true courage. The weeks after Christmas were quiet, almost serene, a stark contrast to the tension that had gripped Willow Creek Estates for months. Emily moved through her days with a growing sense of ease, each moment spent preparing for the baby a reminder of what had been protected and preserved. The nursery, once a refuge shadowed by fear, now radiated calm, filled with soft blankets, tiny clothes neatly folded, and the anticipation of new life. Jonathan remained ever-present, but no longer as a shield against immediate threats. Now he was a partner in quiet celebration, a steady anchor in the rhythm of daily life. They had weathered an ordeal that tested every measure of courage, patience, and resilience, and the experience had transformed them both. For Emily, the journey had been as much internal as external. The fear that once threatened to consume her had been replaced by empowerment, confidence, and a profound awareness of her own strength. Karen, the catalyst for this storm, had become a distant and cautionary figure. Her attempts at intimidation had been met with accountability, and her influence in the neighborhood diminished. She lingered at the edges of Willow Creek Estates, but the fear she once inspired was gone, replaced by a quiet understanding among neighbors that cruelty cannot thrive unchecked. Where once she had seemed untouchable, she was now a reminder that actions have consequences, and that integrity and courage can withstand even the most persistent aggression. Emily often reflected on the journey, considering how close the family had come to real danger and how much had been at stake, not just in physical safety, but in emotional and psychological well-being. She realized that true courage is revealed not in moments of triumph alone, but in the sustained commitment to act ethically, decisively, and protectively in the face of ongoing threats. Every precaution taken, every step of strategy and evidence gathering, had been part of a larger framework that ensured justice and dignity prevailed. Jonathan, too, contemplated the events with quiet satisfaction. His approach had been methodical, rooted in foresight and discipline. He had never acted out of anger or revenge, only out of a commitment to protect his family, uphold integrity, and restore balance. In confronting Karen, he had not only safeguarded Emily and the unborn child, but had also set a precedent within the community that intimidation, harassment, and cruelty would not go unchallenged. Their neighbors, once mere observers, had witnessed the subtle but undeniable shift in power dynamics. Some approached to express admiration for the family's resilience and strategic handling of the situation. Others quietly acknowledged that the ordeal had highlighted the importance of standing together, of ensuring that community rules are enforced fairly, and of holding those who abuse authority accountable. Willow Creek Estates, for all its pristine lawns and curated appearance, had experienced a profound lesson. Civility and kindness matter, but so do vigilance, courage, and integrity. Emily felt a renewed sense of connection to her own capacity for strength. The trauma she had experienced, combined with Jonathan's unwavering support, had revealed her ability to face fear directly and emerge with dignity intact. The pregnancy, once overshadowed by anxiety and dread, now became a source of joy, hope, and anticipation. She took pride not just in surviving the ordeal, but in navigating it with grace and intelligence, understanding that resilience is measured not by absence of fear, but by the ability to act despite it. As the days passed, small victories accumulated into a broader sense of restoration. Household routines returned, neighbors interacted with a new awareness of fairness and accountability, and Emily's anticipation of motherhood brought genuine delight instead of anxiety. The family had emerged from months of tension not broken, but strengthened, bonded by shared courage and unwavering commitment to justice. On the morning of the baby's arrival, the house was filled with quiet excitement and gentle anticipation. Jonathan moved with calm precision, assisting Emily, preparing for the moments that would mark the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. The baby, arriving safely and healthy, became a symbol of resilience, of triumph over adversity, and of the enduring power of protection and family unity. In the following weeks, the community began to see a subtle but meaningful transformation. The lesson of accountability had not been lost. Neighbors became more vigilant in supporting one another, recognizing that courage and integrity create a stronger, safer environment for all. Karen's influence faded further, her once overbearing presence replaced by a respectful distance that underscored the consequences of unchecked aggression. Emily and Jonathan, reflecting on the journey, realized that the true impact of their struggle went beyond immediate safety. It had been a profound lesson in dignity, courage, and moral clarity. Their family had confronted intimidation with strategy and resilience, protected life and integrity, and emerged stronger for the experience. The community had witnessed not only the confrontation of cruelty, but also the quiet, enduring power of steadfastness and ethical action. As the months passed, the family settled into a life marked by hope, love, and strengthened bonds. The nursery, once a symbol of vulnerability, now embodied joy and security. The streets of Willow Creek Estates, once tense with fear, now reflected the quiet order and respect that emerge when courage and accountability guide behavior. Emily often watched the snow fall, reflecting on the journey from fear to empowerment, from harassment to justice, and from uncertainty to safety and pride. In the end, the story of Emily and Jonathan stands as a testament to the power of resilience, strategy, and unwavering moral clarity. The challenges they faced, harassment, intimidation, and escalating threats, were met not with impulsive reaction, but with thoughtful action, careful planning, and steadfast courage. Their victory was not merely personal. It resonated through the community, demonstrating that justice, dignity, and protection are achievable when approached with patience, intelligence, and integrity. As they watched their child grow, Emily and Jonathan knew that the lessons of that period would remain with them forever. That courage is nurtured through preparation and resilience, that fear can be confronted and transformed, and that even in the face of relentless cruelty, love, dignity, and ethical action prevail. Willow Creek Estates, once a place shadowed by intimidation, had become a community where fairness, respect, and accountability were not just ideals, but practiced realities. And in the quiet of their home, surrounded by the warmth of family and the security of justice upheld, Emily felt a profound sense of peace. They had faced fear, confronted cruelty, and emerged with dignity intact. Their story, marked by courage, strategy, and unwavering moral resolve, would endure, not as a tale of conflict alone, but as a testament to the enduring power of protection, integrity, and the human capacity to triumph over adversity.